It is absolutely my pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I love the summit. It's like healthy family relationships. Like, wow, that is an amazing goal for all the families to strive towards that. But the way that I was born into this world. And then, of course, my own experience coming from a broken family myself, with mom and dad divorcing when I was 8 years old, and that being very traumatic, and feeling really rejected and abandoned and alone and unimportant and all those things, because there was such a disconnection with the relationship with my dad after the divorce, that I decided when I grew older and looked back into that time, I'm like, I don't want any child to ever feel that alone and that rejected as I felt. So that's how I got into studying child development, psychology, and social work, and all these things, because I wanted to understand. And in my case, it was sad because my dad ended up dying from cancer before any of that was resolved. So that's just a kind of story like that fuels me to work with parents to connect with your child now, because life is now, and that these changes that are needed in families to help your healthier relationship is so urgent. It's so important, because kids grow up so fast, and they are grown-ups before we even realize. So taking that opportunity to really connect with your child is so close to my heart. I hear so many, as a psychotherapist and as a play therapist, so I do play therapy with children, which means they come to my office. I do what's called child-centered play therapy, which is like children have this inner healing guide, and when they are in a safe, loving, accepting environment, they will work through and heal through their traumas, and they have a lot of trust in that relationship and in that space, which is my therapy office here. So I hear their stories, and I hear the stories of children feeling really sad, feeling sometimes inadvertently, like parents don't mean to, of course, be disconnected from their children. They don't mean to have a situation where the child ends up feeling like they are abandoned or rejected. But without the proper understanding of how we approach children, how we listen to them, they end up feeling that way. So I'm on that side. So I hear and see their stories that they so beautifully share with me. And we are on this healing journey together with children. And my passion is helping parents understand children. They live in a different world. Their communication is very different. They are hard to understand, especially if the behaviors are kind of negative. But that's where I really try to help parents to seek to understand their children first.
So based on that, how should parents communicate or listen with their children?
Yeah, well, let's talk about, before answering that, I want to talk about communication in general. So Dr. Montessori, and I don't think this came from her originally, but it's in her books. Like, I can't remember who had said that we had, 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, which basically means that communication is really more about listening. So many times when we think about communication, especially between parents and children, and think about also in your own relationship with adults and family members, we are almost like just listening to get our own point across. We are listening, thinking about what's the next thing we're going to say. Parents are listening in order to be right, or to infuse a lesson, or to give advice, or to prove the child wrong in some ways. And this is very ineffective communication, because the true form of communication is really connection. That's what it's really like. Really, in order for us to be, and you get to be listened to, and you get to be understood as parents as well. But in order for you to get to that point, to really, what parents desire, of course, and what the parents' job is too, is to coach and guide their children through life. But the message is not going to land if we go through it with control and trying to domineer the child or lecture. This is immediate shut off that happens. So my first coaching for someone, for a parent or any person really who says like, well, my child is not listening to me, those children in therapy, they tell me they don't feel listened to. So the first step is to listen. My question is always, well, are you listening to your child? Because we get to fill their cups first in terms of them being listened to. And so many times, Lily, we kind of we don't value the communication of children. We brush kids off because their communication could be, look at the speck of dust on the floor, or so many questions like, that can be annoying sometimes, or whatever. We put an assumption that this is insignificant when it's really important to the child, actually, whatever it is. So when kids come to my office, I listen to their needs, their desires, what they want to do, what they want to play, how they want to play it, and I try to make it happen for them so that they feel fully acknowledged and accepted and listened to. So when their cup of being listened to and feeling understood is filled, they are more likely to also listen to now requests from parents of things that they need to comply with and stuff like that. The other important thing I want to say about communication is that 90% is nonverbal. And again, especially with children, because their brain is not developed yet, their language, like little toddlers are just barely developing their language, yet they can understand so much more. A lot of tantrums are actually caused by the frustration of not being able to express oneself. So only probably less than 10% of communication is the actual words. Everything else is it's body language, it's your eyes, it's the cadence and the tone of your voice, and really what it also is the intention behind the communication. It's your, what I call the way of being. Do you show up as loving, compassionate, understanding, even if there's a huge mess that needs to be cleaned in the room? Do you show up like, you never clean your mess, you need to clean it up right now? Or do you show up as like, wow, I see toys all over the place here, what should we do with those? So a lot of communication is about the intention versus being reactive. And what is your way of being? Like, what's your essence? What's the energy that you bring in? That in and of itself can calm things down, where children are really more likely to listen. And this works great. This really does. I do it in my therapy office. I worked in a preschool where there's like 24, when preschools were open, 24 little 3 to 6 year olds. And what you can do with just by your energy itself. One more thing I'm going to say, smiling. I just worked with one parent, and my feedback for her was like, smile more. Like, anytime you approach your child, especially if you need to correct something, like in my office, if child like accidentally breaks something or they think they're gonna be in trouble, I'm gonna have the most biggest radiant smile, and I'm gonna say it's okay. So this mom did this, and it worked wonders.
That's good.
The reason is that children who are stressed out, they've done studies around this. Children who have under a lot of stress, they actually interpret our facial expression in a threatening way. Like, we maybe could be frustrated, we might not be even angry with the child, we could be frustrated. But this study was also saying that just a neutral face, children who have trauma background, who are stressed out, even a neutral face they interpret it as threatening. When child interprets something as threatening, they're going to be in a fight or flight mode. So I'm working with their nervous system by smiling a lot. Okay. So under communication is a lot of non-verbal communication. It's more about this really like generous listening, like putting aside your agenda and just entering. Think about it this way, like, okay, how can I enter into the secret of childhood? Like Dr. Montessori talked about, like, how can I enter, like, how can I view the world through the eyes of this child in front of me right now? And really trying to understand, and then reflecting my understanding, my empathy and compassion back to the child. And it doesn't even have to be a child. This works great also especially with teenagers, any relationship. That's why I love this transformational parenting framework, because it's any age, it doesn't matter. You can use the same techniques and tools with any age person, even with your spouse or your partner. Works great.